Hello Year 8. So today we're going to be having a look at your exam image, which is this one here. This is your end of year exam image you are going to copy. You should be starting this off in lessons. So in lessons, we're just going to talk through briefly today what you will be doing in lessons, which is gridding the picture up and drawing the outline. And I'm going to talk through a little bit about your shading technique so that you have the best opportunity to get the highest grade possible. So when you're in class, you're going to be given a couple of things. You're going to be given your printed picture and your piece of paper. You're probably given a packet to store it all in as well. You will need a rubber and a sharpener. You should have a ruler with you as part of your equipment. And as a basic, you should have a HB pencil. Now, if you do have other pencils, if you do have 2Bs, 4Bs and things like that, and you'd like to bring them, you're perfectly welcome to. And also if you have a smudge stick or a smudge stump, anything that they usually call blending stumps, things like that, you are welcome to bring them. If you've never used one before, I probably wouldn't choose your exam day as your first time to use them, but you are able to use them if you would like. Essentially, they're just blending tools that support you blending this in. You can also bring things in like cotton buds to use as a blending tool, or you can use a piece of tissue as well. So if you would like a little bit of a blending tool, you can, just don't over rely on it. We do want to see some of your shading techniques in here. So the first thing you're going to be doing, and you should be doing this in lessons with any luck, in a prep lesson just before your exam, is you're going to be gridding up your picture. Now, my classes have been asking me whether or not they are expected to draw it this exact size as is, or whether they should be scaling it up to paper. My feedback has been that you can choose. So you can either do as is, the same size. If you'd like to try and scale it up and make it the largest it can be on this piece of paper, that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm going to show you as is today, because that seems to be the most popular choice. So the first thing I'm doing for now is just measuring the whole outside box, which is 15, I'm just going to write it on there, by, got a bit of paint on my ruler, 12.5, 15 by 12.5. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw my box 15 by 12.5 on here. You can choose where you want to draw it. Some people put it right in the corner, some people put it in the centre, completely up to you. I will say, when you draw the outside of this box, just like when you do your working grid lines, I would personally do this relatively lightly. Okay, the reason for that is that when you then do your shading on your outer edges, it will look much nicer if your edge just goes up to a shaded point as opposed to a very thick, heavy outline. In the printed image that we have, there's not a heavy box around the outside. So just a suggestion, not imperative, but personally I would do quite a light line. Next thing I need to do is draw my grid. If you're freehanding, it is going to be much harder to get an accurate drawing. So we are highly recommending that you grid with this. With your grid size, you can choose 1 centimetre boxes, 2 centimetre boxes, 3 centimetre boxes, whatever you are most comfortable in. And we should know pretty confidently how to draw a grid now, so I'm just going to fast forward through this bit. A couple of small tips. Make sure, like I'm doing now, you do measure top and bottom and join them up. I've seen so many people draw wonky lines because they're only measuring the top and then going anywhere they feel like along the bottom. You can't do it by eye, please measure top and bottom. Also, just like I did, make sure you start from the same side. So often people start from here at 0 and then spin their piece of paper around and start from there at 0, and then you're not going to get straight lines because it's not necessarily going to be exactly the same. So top and bottom, measure both sides and then just join up. Okay, you can use a pen to join these up if you prefer. I'm going to grab a slightly darker pencil. Next thing we need to do is draw our outline. Again, we will give you an opportunity to do that in the lesson before, depending on your time management. Okay, we have to think about our pace here. This grid should not take you the full lesson. Once you're ready, you do have the rest of your lesson time to start sketching out this outline. So first thing I would go for, it's up to you. There's a few different ways people do it. I believe Miss Glassick is probably going to show you how you can make yourself a small viewfinder. I will show you how to do that. Okay, so if you do want to make yourself a viewfinder, all you need is a piece of scrap paper, just a small piece like this, anything will do. And you want to draw a box the size of your grid boxes. Okay, so this is the same. I've chosen 2 by 2 centimetres. I've drawn a 2 by 2 centimetre grid box. You're just going to cut that out. There we go, I've now cut that out. So now that is the same size as my boxes in my drawing. So what you can do for this to help you is you can just lay it over one of your grid boxes and then you can have a look at the box that's there and you consider what goes into it. So there's a few ways people will do this drawing. The first thing I suggest is just sketching an outline. Personally, the way I do that is I try to find my key feature first. So personally, probably what I do is find this edge of the eye and I would follow that around, but I'd have to keep an eye and count my boxes. What other people like to do is work your way along from one to the next box and sketch out what you see. So in this box, there is lots of textures. The first line I probably have is this one here that goes from that crack just there, comes into that corner there, pretty much goes through the edge. And there's one little wrinkle there. I probably won't draw every single wrinkle right now, but I'll draw a few of the key main lines just to help me. Okay, so a few of the crease lines there. The main part I'm going to get to is the eye. So it's 1, 2, 3 boxes up. 1, 2, 3. My eye starts here and it just starts off into the edge. Curves around that corner. You may need to turn your piece of paper around while you're working. That's absolutely fine. You do whatever works best for you. Comes down but not quite into the corner of that box. That slopes all the way into that corner. We really want to look at angles and slopes and shapes here. It's going to be the most important thing for your accuracy. It's looking at how that curves. I'm going to turn it around because again that helps me a little bit more turning it. Now I can't technically see a lot of what's under that eye, so I'm working a little bit. That's going to be a lot of eyelashes there, so I'm working a little bit. I'm just trying to imagine there where that line would naturally carry on underneath those eyelashes. So I'm giving myself a really loose idea at the moment until I can see the edge starts back up around here, which is 1 box down, 1, 2, 3 along. I start seeing it come through. 1 down, 3 along. And I'm curving that edge, and that's a good start. Now, if it helps you, as I'm kind of counting my boxes and I'm saying, right, 1, 2, 3 up, 1 along, that's there. If it does help, you can number your boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And sometimes people find that easier because you're not, can't count, because you're not hunting for the right boxes. If you've got them numbered, you can just straight say, right, row 4, row 4. That might help you as well. And we've got this bottom lid. So all we're looking for now is just shapes, which is hard. It's hard to, you know, it's easier to look at that picture and think, whoa, that is a lot of information in one picture. And it is a lot of information. If you can break it down, I'm just doing this kind of bottom lid line now. If you can break it down to a little bit less information, a little bit less scary. Okay, so the next important bit we're going to have to do is the iris. That is the shape of the eye just here. Now, it's not a perfect circle. Whenever we draw eyes, I think, without thinking too much about it, we want to draw a perfect circle. It's not. First thing I'd look at is how pretty parallel it is almost to this outer edge just here. Just starts coming away just there. And again, use your grid boxes to help you. Just starts coming into the, just peeps into that box there. That really helps when you just see those tiny little corners just coming into one of the boxes. Gives you a lot of idea of your shape. The reflection in the eye, that's something I want to sketch quite early on because I want to know where that goes. And again, I could use my viewfinder and have a look what information is in that box. See how much of that shine I can see in there. It's quite a bit lighter all in there. And actually I can just see that line there where that kind of shine stops. As I said, you might want to roughly and very lightly mark out where a few of your eyelashes go before you get rid of any of your grid lines. But do not press them hard just yet. You can just plan out where they go, how long they are, how many there are. And that'll help with this section as well. Roughly where they are. Don't panic about every eyelash being exact, because you're probably going to have a little play with them later on. The next thing I do, we want to start shading relatively soon, but personally what I would do, places, if we've got it all marked out like this, then I would start taking away some of the grid lines that you don't need personally. Not necessarily get rid of them all, but I would probably just lighten them up a tiny bit in some key places where you know you want it to be lighter. So I'm not talking about getting rid of all of them, but in this area here where it's lighter, I'm just going to soften them up just a little bit, maybe in that edge there. We still will need our grid lines in places, so don't get rid of all of them just yet. Just places where it's going to be a bit lighter and you know it's going to be a bit lighter. There we go. So I've only lightened it up really there, there and there, just because that's going to be some of my lightest sections. An extra tip. Right, okay, so we need to start shading. Now, if you've only got a HB pencil, that's absolutely fine, we'll work with the HB. The HB is going to be fantastic for the very fine line details. If you do end up with softer pencils, if you do have a group of pencils like 2Bs or 4Bs or anything like that, I won't use anything too dramatic for this, 2 and a 4 maybe, they are a little bit better for blending. They're darker, but they're a little bit better for blending because they're softer. So I'm just going to use, I think, a 2B for today. I won't use anything drastic like 9Bs. And again, this is down to you where you decide you'd like to start in this draw. So I'm doing a very light shading along that area, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit hatching and cross hatching. This is where if you do have a blending tool, you can make use of it. If you don't, that is not a problem. You can use your fingers and things like that. You can see I'm just kind of working my way up to the eye, because all of this is quite dark. So I'm taking this whole area and I'm doing a little bit of shading. And you can see when I'm shading a larger area and I want it to be quite soft, I move my hand back to the back of the pencil and I try and use the edge of my pencil as opposed to holding it very close and using a fine point, because I'm going to get very, very dark lines. Okay, so I've just started shading that area there. You can then use your smudging tool or your finger or a piece of tissue, anything at all. I just wrap a little bit of tissue around my finger. And I'm just going to smudge that in a little bit. And I'm doing that just to soften some of the shaded lines. You can extend that out a little bit further. And I'm going to blend that. I'm actually going to see how far I can drag that. I can drag that quite far, but it does mean I've lost my eyelashes, which I may need to sketch back in. This is why I said don't be too worried about the eyelashes at the start, because you are probably going to lose them a couple of times as we sketch them out. And again, I'm going to go a bit heavy. You're going to find with this that the only way you're going to get lots of detail is by going over a couple of sections a couple of times, building up sections and layers. Okay, I might now go in a little bit darker in some of the darker places. It's very dark along that line there. Okay, so I've started blending that out. We could do that pretty much all around the outside if we wanted to. So I'm going to also start out with the outside of my eye. You can see I'm going quite dark in that section because it is very shadowy there. And then, actually interestingly, as it comes around this corner, it gets darker on the outside and not the inside, if you could say it. There's small things like that you're going to have to pay close attention to. And you can mark out those two areas. Now they are very dark. So if you have a darker pencil, a 4B, I'm getting to the point in here where I'm going to be pressing pretty hard. Remember, we need to show full tonal range in this drawing, so places that are dark should be very dark. There is a small area there where there is quite a prominent shine, and I'm going to go round that. Okay, we don't want to leave that to later and try and rub it out because we want it to keep nice and light. I'm working my way around that section, and you can just see how hard I'm pressing now in these darker areas. And I'm going to start smudging that in now. So again, your piece of tissue, your cotton bud, your blending tool. I just kind of fold my piece of tissue round so I get a relatively sharp edge, something I can control a little bit more. Okay, so I guess we're going to now start on the actual pupil. Now there is a lot going on here. This is obviously the bit everyone's like, oh, I'm never going to be able to draw that. So we're just going to talk about how we do this slowly. Okay, so we've already marked off, when we were drawing our grid lines, our reflection. So I've got some very key features there. All the way around, we have quite a few details. The first thing we have is this very clear texture and lines, radiating lines. Now, first thing to remember when you draw eyes and irises is that all of your lines are going to radiate outwards from the iris. Okay, so I'm just doing this as a bit of a hint. I don't need them right now. Oh, that wasn't very good. But they're all going to radiate outwards. So all of our lines, if we're going to make it look accurate, have to go out that way. Okay, that helps me when I draw those little lines. Next thing I'm going to do is have a little think about these key details. I'm going to use my grid to draw, and actually I'm going to do this heavier than you'd probably think, to draw this detail, and that's the lines and the sections. They're radiating out from the iris. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing the darker area a little bit around the outside. Not heavy to start with, but I'm just going to use my shading to start defining the outside because it's quite a prominent part. Just a little bit around this edge, but I'm paying close attention to what's there. It does kind of come in a slightly darker section here. I'm going to start just building out from my I'm going to press relatively heavy. I'm going to go in those radiating lines that I talked about earlier, all pointing towards the middle of the iris. I'm going to start drawing some lines. And I'm not perfectly trying to copy. I'm trying to copy the general amount and gaps and distance that they are. But I'm kind of following my radiating around from the outside in. And I'm pressing hard when I start, and I'm letting the pressure release as I go, so there's a very small point at the end. Okay, so I'm going to start that there, and then there's quite a few coming out from where I've drawn those lines here, so I'm just going to start doing the same thing, but actually going to do them starting at that little detailed line I drew there. And what really gives this the strong effect is that all of the lines are radiating out from the centre. That's what we want to do. See how we go. Right, next bit I'm going to work on is this shine before I do the rest of the eye, because it's quite specific and the lines in the shine are quite sharp. Finish. Now I'm not perfectly trying to copy every single lash. You're never going to be able to do that. So I'm just kind of getting a general impression of where they all are. And I'm again doing that kind of pressure at the end, loosening it up as we go around. And that's actually a lot of the detail in the eye now. So that is the scary bit. Now I'm just comparing to make sure all my shapes are right. I feel like that bit could probably curve around a little bit more. Okay, so we're pretty happy with that. So the next thing we're going to have to do, there's a couple of things we'll have to do next. We're getting pretty close to doing the eyelashes. Before we do that, I just check that you're happy with things like creases under the eyes. Personally, I'm not going to do loads of that because it would take such a long time to add all of that detail in. But I am going to add a few of those little textures and little creases. Okay, so the last thing I really need to add now is my eyelashes. Pretty much the last thing I've done. You can see I've left it to the end because they're going to be really sharp, heavy lines. They're quite tricky to do. Now, my best suggestion with this, if you've got tonal pencils, use your darker pencils. I'm actually going to use a 2B for this, not a really heavy 4B, because I don't want my lines to be quite sharp while still being quite thick. I'm going to move this to there for this. That's probably going to be better. And same thing we've talked about before. Obviously, we can start looking at where we've drawn all our details. You want to press hard at the end and then let it go. You're never going to be able to perfectly place all of your eyelashes. Start where you feel is most accurate, look at the angle and the curve, and just do it relatively quickly. Okay, you don't want to really slowly draw them in really solid because they'll look very blocky. Okay, you can see that actually these eyelashes start just above the edge there. Quite a lot of them curve in different directions, some of them overlap. They start to curve as they go further up. They start to get a bit longer. Really think about the angle, how some of them flick up. Quite a lot of them are going to start flicking up, and they're going to start getting a bit longer. You see, I'm not desperately measuring it out or trying to put them in the right place for now. Really look at those angles and where it starts. It starts all along this kind of lighter edge I've left there. A couple of different directions, a couple of really small ones. The bottom ones are generally a bit smaller or less than the top ones, but there are a few longer ones. Lots of little quick flicks. And that was most of our drawing. Now, I could probably sit now and refine it a little bit more. I could certainly get a bit darker on the inside of the eye there. I could certainly start toning down a couple of areas. I could add more detail into that skin. But for now, I am pretty happy with that. That is a very hard drawing. Now, we under no illusion that is a very, very tricky drawing. Okay, there's a lot of detail in there. We don't expect you to capture all of it, but we do want you to have a really good go. Okay, but good luck. I look forward to seeing your drawings.